All right, my good people. So I just got finished watching the indie horror game showcase, and I remember they had one last year that I watched, and I thought was pretty damn solid. And this year, I think it was a whole hell of a lot better than even last year's show was. It's just I think that this space, the indie horror game space, seems to be evolving pretty fucking quickly, and it seems like we used to lack variety a little bit in the indie horror game space. We saw a lot of very, very similar games coming out nonstop, and you still see that to some degree. But it's just, we're getting to a spot now where we got a good bit of unique looking games in the indie horror game space. So this was, I went through and picked out like, I don't know, 15 or so of my favorite trailers. So I would really recommend going and watching the full 2 hour show. If you're a fan of horror games, if you're a fan of indie horror games, I highly recommend going and watching the full showcase. It's when I went through and selected my 15 games, I was trying to get a good variety of games, stuff that showed gameplay so that you can see it running on the screen. But there's some really good stuff in the showcase that I left out here, so I would recommend jumping in and then watching the full show. But for those of you who want a quick recap of my favorite games that were shown off at the Indie Horror Game Showcase, that is what we're going to be going through here today. If you're new, consider subscribing. Like the video if you enjoy it, all that good shit. But without further ado, let's kick this episode off with By Sweet Carole. So this is coming from one of the leads on the original Remothered. And this is essentially a 2D side-scrolling horror game. It has like this classic Disney art style and presentation with the cutscenes and shit. You see a little bit of combat in here. And you also are, outside of just that little bit of combat, it seems that through moment-to-moment gameplay, you're going to be controlling other characters other than just the main character that you see in the majority of the gameplay. Like you see at a certain point, there's these rabbits that you're controlling and you're trying to avoid some blade or some shit. And there's also a section where you're like holding your breath to avoid detection. It just looks genuinely fresh. Obviously from the art style perspective, but even from the gameplay variety, I'm pretty sold on this thing. It seems to have like some stalker style enemies that are roaming around and chasing you, which is very reminiscent of Remothered and the Clock Tower games and shit like that. So By Sweet Carole is coming 2025, no specific release date as of just yet, but yeah, this from the moment I saw this last year, a couple years ago, it's been on my radar. It looks really, really freaking good, and I think this is the best trailer we've seen so far. Next up, we have Kingdom of the Night. So this is like a top-down action horror game. You see some inventory management and shit going on. I assume you're going to be getting different weapons and stuff like that throughout the course of the game. From an art style perspective, it kind of has like this Vampire Survivor sort of vibe going on, but it looks more, from a gameplay perspective, it has more of a melee, just top-down action game look to it. And you even see a little bit of dialogue decision-making in the trailer, which, as you guys know, I'm very much a sucker for that. And now we'll move on to Please Insert Disc. So at first it seems like this is a game where you're going to be playing as a devil who is riding around on a skateboard, but then there's a disc reader error that pops up, and then it's like a PS2 database where you're going through and you're trying to look through your save files, and so I was like, okay, what the hell is this? Because at first it says, okay, it's like the game's called Hell Grinder or some shit, and then you see going through a PS2 database, I'm like, are we playing as a skateboarding game, or is this some sort of going through and trying to troubleshoot your console, and is it like a puzzle solving game? And so I went to Steam, and yes, it is a puzzle solving game where you are going through and trying to fix this PS2 console. It's not exactly a PS2, but it's very much inspired by the PlayStation 2. So I would personally rather play a game where you're riding around on a skateboard as the devil than I would want to play a game where you're troubleshooting a PS2 or a fantasy version of a PS2. But I don't know, just for originality, for the unique trailer alone, I wanted to include Please Insert Disc. And next up, we got to shout out the Thing remaster. Night Dive, back at it again. We already knew this was getting remastered, but this was this was a nice look at some new gameplay. You see the combat in here, you see some boss fights, quite a few different environmental shots in the trailer. I just personally love that Night Dive is pretty much committed to keeping the original version of the game intact and only adding in the necessary touch-ups. That they're not going in and trying to do these full-blown, from the ground up remakes. It's more than just a port job, which I guess that's why you call it a remaster and not a remake and not a port. It's a remaster, and they keep the original spirit of the games intact, and I think that's super, super important. Their track record so far has been excellent with what was it this year? They put out the System Shock remake this year that it got glowing reviews across the board, and also it got a physical release. So I'm hoping that I would assume the Thing remaster will also get a physical release. That's even bigger of with the licensed IP and the fact that it was such a cult hit on the PS2. I would imagine the Thing remaster will get a physical release as well. And then we have Sorry We're Closed. This, to me, this gave me a lot of Suda51 vibes. It looks just totally out of its mind. And you can for sure see that it's janky. It's immediately apparent that this game is working with a pretty small budget and probably a bit too ambitious for that budget. But I appreciate people who are just trying to hit home runs. Opposed to, okay, I'm just going to get on base. Fuck it. If you're up to bat, swing for the damn fences. And if you strike out, it is what it is. I love the ambition on display here. So it looks like an old school Resident Evil game or, an old school Silent Hill game, but just dipped in a bucket of neon paint. It is very, very bright, which could maybe be a little bit off-putting to some people. I understand that. But you're swapping between third person and first person shooting. You see sections where you're doing some like 2D side scrolling. You even see, once again, some dialogue options in there. Yeah, man, it's coming out November 14th, so we don't have long to wait on this thing at all. I just think this looks really, really cool. I think this looks very unique, very fresh. And once again, I think that's kind of the theme of this showcase. We just got a lot of unique, different looking shit in the indie horror game space, which is really encouraging. And speaking of that, Paperhead. So this is like an old school Doom style game, but a lot of the environments are made out of paper. And you can take a pencil and like draw on the environments to create objects to place in those blank spaces. So you'll see the character draw a door on this wall. And so now he's able to access the other side of the building through the door that he just drew. And I don't know. I think that little ideas like that go a long way. And you got a cool boomer shooter going on with the gameplay and then just throwing in that one little twist into the mix. Yeah, I think that's sick. Episode 0 drops in November and it is 100% free. I don't know if the entire game is 100% free or just that first episode, but regardless, you can get a taste of the game for free in November. And then we have Among Ashes. And so this, once again, has that PS1 look to it, but it's in the first person perspective. And it's got a cool setup. It's so you're playing as a guy who bought this game, and it's like the game is supposedly haunted. It has like this dark lore behind it to where if you play the game, weird shit begins to happen in your real life. So it's like, this forbidden game that the dude gained access to, and the rule is that you have to finish the entire game in one sitting, or something bad is going to happen to you, or some shit like that. But there's some cool shit going on in this trailer. You're swapping perspectives. You're going from, like a first person shooter to a top down action game. And there's even a section earlier on where you're driving a car. I'm assuming that's probably not real gameplay. I'm assuming that's a cutscene. But yeah, some cool variety going on in this Among Ashes trailer. And that is releasing December 2024. And then we have Cabernet. And this is a 2D side-scrolling adventure game, and you are seemingly doing quests for people, and like you're leveling up your stats, and you have like an art stat, a music stat. At one point, a nihilism stat pops up. You can raise your nihilism score, which is probably going to be equally hilarious and depressing. But yeah, you see like relationship tree systems in place where I guess it's like keeping track of the bonds you've made in the game and your current status with each different character in the game world. Later on, you see your character shapeshift into a damn bat. Like, fuck yeah, dude, sign me up. I want to shapeshift into a bat. Yeah, there's like you're playing the piano. Once again, I hate to keep repeating myself here, but so many of these trailers just offered up a wide variety of different gameplay, moment to moment interaction inside of these trailers. And yeah, so Cabernet is releasing on. It's releasing in 2025. No specific release date, just a 2025 release window. And then we have Vultures, Scavengers of Death. And we don't really see many Parasite Eve inspired titles, but that is exactly what you're getting here with Vultures. The grid formatted turn-based combat that you know from Parasite Eve. And we've already seen a good bit of Vultures, Scavengers of Death, but I just think every time we see it, it continues to look damn solid. And I think, once again, similar to what we were talking about earlier with the Thing remaster, I think this is just the best trailer we've seen of it so far, going around and solving some puzzles, and you got the little keypad. You're going and getting the note, and then finding the key to type in, or the numbers to type in on the keypad. And yeah, there's a demo right now available on Steam. So if any of y'all want to check it out over there on Steam, you can do so right now. And then we go to Monster DNA. So it seems like you are a scientist and your job is to create like the perfect monster specimen. And you're given instructions on what to create and how to create them and what concoctions to mix together to create this specimen. And it seems like maybe something goes wrong, and then the container, like the holding tank for the monster, breaks, and maybe they get out and they're roaming around the facility. I'm kind of just assuming there because none of that is shown in the trailer. It does show the tank breaking, but I wonder if it's just going to be a game about creating monsters, because I don't really know if that will have any longevity. If there's, the monster gets out and you got to kind of go into this hide and seek style gameplay scenario around this facility, I think that could be cool. Or, it could just be like a 2-hour adventure game where you're trying to create the perfect monster specimen without fucking up. Maybe, yeah, there's something to that as well. And next up, we have Out of Hands. And I'm just going to pull up the Steam description for this one for you because this was a batshit trailer. Obviously, I'll have the trailer running for you all to see, but the Steam description here reads, Out of Hands is a thrilling title that blends video collage graphics with gripping psychological horror. Will you seek the truth that lurks shrouded in a wicked, warped world? And can you bear its weight? Misty memories threaten to tear you apart and contort you into being made. Into a being? Whoa. Threaten to tear you apart and contort you into a being made out of hands. Oh, okay. I get it there. I'm a little slow on the draw there, but a being made out of hands. Gotcha. So this looks batshit. It seems like there might be some mild deck building going on in here. Maybe a little bit of turn-based battles of some sorts. It seems like a lot of, once again, battling with your psyche. And I wish I could continue on giving you more description for this game, but really the video will speak for itself. The trailer that you're seeing will speak for itself. It looks fucking insane, and it's releasing early 2025. Out of hands. Okay, then. Now we go on to White Knuckle. So once again, going back to the PS1 styled visuals, or really not necessarily PS1, just retro styled visuals with this game. And it's a first person parkour horror game. So if Dying Light had released a few generations ago, that's what you would get. And I don't know, maybe Dying Light isn't the right comparison. Maybe more Mirror's Edge would be a more fitting comparison, because this is like 100% parkour focused gameplay. There's a little itty bitty bit of combat at the end of the trailer where the dude throws a stake at a bat that's chasing him or some shit, which I actually thought that looked pretty cool. I really don't care if there's combat or no combat, because I just think the parkour here looks so damn cool. He takes that stake and throws it into a wall at a certain point, and then he runs and jumps and grabs the stake and leaps on to the next platform that he's trying to get to. It just, this looks, I'm all the way down for this. This looks really cool to me. White Knuckle, no release date on that one if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, no release date given for White Knuckle. And then we move on to maybe my game of the show. There's actually one more, but this could be my game of the show, Vampire Dynasty. So this looks a lot like a Bethesda-styled RPG, but instead of giving you the Dark Brotherhood as like just a faction quest, it's the entire game in Vampire Dynasty. You're playing as a vampire, and once again, we got some reoccurring themes here. A lot of variety, but a lot of reoccurring themes as well. You could shapeshift into a bat. You're this big ass bat flying around, and when you're on foot, you're going around drinking blood. You're making decisions. You got variety to how you spec out your character and build your character. A big ass skill tree that pops up at the beginning of this trailer. And you can also play it in co-op if you want to. You can play it single player or co-op. Going around building your castle, and it looks really fucking cool, dude. I'm loving that we're seeing, we got for so long in the retro, or in the indie retro space, like the retro inspired titles were consistently NES, SNES, and now it's so cool that we're going N64, PS1, and now this is even somewhat in that 7th generation of taking inspiration from that 7th generation of Oblivion and shit like that. Or maybe you could look at this and see more of a Morrowind aesthetic to it with just the visuals. But yeah, this is really cool. I think this probably would be my game of the show. And I believe I saw that it was in early access, or it was entering into early access in 2024. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, Vampire Dynasty, that looked really good in my opinion. Cold and Afraid. So this, the first thing I thought of when I saw this was it reminded me a lot of Still Life on the original Xbox, but with maybe a little bit more PTSD going on here in Cold and Afraid. You're playing as a lady whose daughter was killed, and you are going to therapy and you're trying to work through, that trauma. But you are also a police officer and you're wanting to return to duty. So you're trying to complete your therapy so that you can return to duty and do your investigative work. But it seems like there's some dual world shit going on here, where you're investigating a crime that might not actually be real, and you are maybe solving that crime in your head, which could possibly allow you to work out your own shit in reality and then come to some breakthrough conclusion in your therapy sessions. I don't know, just kind of speculating there, but this is one of the other highlights of the show for me. This just looks like a hard-hitting narrative, and we don't often get super in-depth, interesting stories in the horror game space. So yeah, I got my eye on Cold and Afraid. So next up we got Coven, and this is in early access right now, and it very much gives me Dark Watch vibes. Like right off the bat, I was like, holy shit, this looks a lot like Dark Watch on the PS2, which I've been really nostalgic about that game for some reason lately. I've brought it up in conversation like 2 or 3 times in the past month. Maybe it's the Halloween spooky season spirit. That's just like such a fun, spooky themed game to jump into. And yeah, it's a first-person shooter. You got spells and shit. The Coven looks sick. It looks simple but fun, and that's kind of what you hope for with a game like this. So yeah, Coven in early access right now. Go give it a look. And yeah, let's close off here. Dark web streamer. So I pulled up the Steam description for this one as well. It says, manage your skills, social stats, money, viewers, subscribers, relationships, and more as you juggle your stream and your survival. You have unique playthroughs, encounter countless procedurally generated events, NPCs, web pages, items, entities, histories, stories, rituals, crafting recipes, and more. No two playthroughs are ever the same. Emergent narratives, completely randomized encounters, events, characters, histories, and outcomes mean a story which makes itself in response to your action and those of the world around you. So yeah, once again, this is one of those games where I feel like I had to bring up the Steam description, because what you're seeing in the trailer, like trying to find any sort of way to describe what this game is or how it's going to play just by what we're seeing in the trailers is pretty damn hard. But it did close off the indie horror game showcase, so I imagine I could see this thing having a pretty big impact when it comes out. Just with the current streaming culture, and I could see a bunch of streamers streaming dark web streamer, and it becoming one of those like indie hit cult hits, and then taking on a whole new legacy as it ends up going on to sell millions of copies, and like the Balatro situation, which I loved to see earlier this year, where that dude was like one dude who made the game and he ended up becoming a millionaire off of the success of Balatro. Always cool to see shit like that happen in the indie game space. And yeah, man, that's the indie horror showcase. Some of my favorite reveals, and yeah, I would definitely recommend for any of you all who are fans of horror games to go and check out the full show. There's a bunch of shit that was in there that looked really cool that I didn't put on the list because I didn't want this to be an hour-long video. But those are my favorite games that were revealed. Let me know if you did watch the show. Any that I missed out on, any that you're like, hey, I think keep your eye on X, Y, and Z game, because they're looking like they could be potentially heavy hitters. Hit me in the comments down below. Let me know, and I shall see you good people in the next video. Goodbye.